Hey guys, Robert here with the Piston Slap channel, and today we're going to be doing a voiceover, because that's always fun, right? So today what I want to talk about was a little bit of motorcycling, maintenance, and stuff like that. So I got this really fancy speech typed up, and I'm going to read it out to you guys, and we'll see how this is. So yeah, for those of you wondering, it sounds scripted. It really is scripted. I actually took the time to type this, and now I'm going to read it back to you word for word, hopefully. Probably not. Might add a little bit in there. But let's get going on this one. So getting out and riding your motorcycle is supposed to be a stress relief, is it not? We do that to escape the everyday stresses of whatever it is in your life. Your boss, your job, the price at the corner hot dog stand, whatever. When we're out riding, that's supposed to be the fun, carefree miles of paved or maybe even dirt road, just winding along to your heart's content. Not sitting on the side waiting for a tow truck or a buddy to come rescue you. I only ask this because how many times have you looked on social media or has this happened to you? You see a bike on a trailer with someone mentioning, it's the worst ride ever. Or the bike has all its guts all strung out in the garage and the person saying that this particular bike has always been a problem. It's cost them huge amounts of money. It's a money pit. So let's take a step back. Take a look at your bike, your situation. When was the last time you truly took the time to look over every nut, bolt, seal, washer, just to make sure that things aren't rattling off somewhere in the backcountry? Now be honest with yourself. Does washing your bike, cleaning the wheels and the chain count as looking your bike over for its needs? I'm not here to tell anyone how to look over their bike, but more or less let's just think outside the box when we're doing it. Let's take an example. Let's use myself. The last ride I did with my DRZ, I was pretty hard on it. Harder than I'd ever been before. I'm not saying that I was bouncing the engine off the rev limiter and wiggling the valves, or cold starting the bike and then just pinning it to win it. I was slipping the clutch to keep the traction and the engine speed up. There were times that I wasn't riding fast enough to keep the engine cool. So now you may be asking or saying, well, it still runs, why mess with it? While that may be true in some people's aspects and life and everything, but here's my point. This is gonna be a little bit strung out, so just stick with me on that. The clutch pack is a wear item. Slipping it creates a lot of heat on the steels and the friction discs inside. Let's not forget about the other parts inside that make it work, like the pressure plate, the springs. Finally, all that heat has to be dispersed somewhere, right? The first thing outside of the metal parts in your engine is the oil that's running all over it, that keeps it all lubricated. But that's not the only thing that the oil does. It also cools those hot parts as it's running over it. It cleans them as it removes the debris from the component and transfers all that to the filter. The thing to do for the everyday person would be, once the bike is all cleaned up, to remove the clutch and inspect it for any damage. Lucky for me, the people that designed the DRZ put a pretty good clutch in it, and it didn't need to be replaced or repaired after the inspection. Let's look at this a different way and see how it could have played out. Say I never took the clutch apart or checked it. I get ready for my next ride, and I'm 60 miles back in the woods up some canyon only accessible by motorcycle, and the clutch starts slipping. Then finally just gives out. At that point, would it have been better to inspect and fix that clutch if needed after the last ride? Now you're sitting on the trail side and the fun factor is just washed away. Not to mention, if you're riding with your buddies, now you're their problem. It ruins the ride. While not all things can be avoided, some things can be by just a little bit of maintenance and TLC, or just looking at things in general. As I had mentioned before, I had gotten the bike hot. I had never found a concrete answer to what is hot on a dirt bike. Some say when it boils over, others will say when it shuts off, and then there's that little red light that turns on sometimes. That's a joke. I'm lucky to have the Trail Tech system on mine that gives me a temp readout of the coolant inside the radiator. So there I was, moving slowly, trying to climb the side of this hill. I start fanning my clutch to keep the RPMs up and keep the traction. I start smelling hot oil. Following that, I catch a glimpse of the trail tech lights flashing at me to let me know that my engine's starting to get warm. I'm only halfway up the hill at this point, so I just keep pressing on. By the time I reach a safe point to stop, the temp rating on the trail tech is about 273 degrees. I let the bike cool off and check the coolant tank to make sure, that it's not empty or something had popped or got torn. Everything looked good to go. When I got home, going back to the clutch inspection, not only did I look at that, but I did remove the oil and filter. With the engine that hot, it starts to break down the oil and all the cool little additives inside it that make it do what good oil does. With extreme heat, that's when deposits start to form, so that's another reason to change it out. Next, I looked over the cooling system to make sure that there were no bulges in any of the hose or any leaking fittings or radiator tanks or anything like that. With the coolant that hot, the system will be at maximum pressure. Pressure does vary from bike to bike, but whatever the cap is your maximum pressure. There really isn't anything that says how to change out your coolant if you get it hot. I just personally change mine once every couple of years just to keep the additive package fresh in it. And it's a really cheap maintenance item to do on your bike. Let's take a second and look at a motorcycle. You finish riding and the bike's back home all spiffed up and looking good. I like to check out all the electrical stuff first, lights, blinkers, and such like that, just in case something got ripped off or disconnected. Next, I'll go around, check the chain, slack. Not saying that you need to bust out a tape measure and get the exact number of your chain slack unless you just knew and you have no clue what it is. Those of us that have been around a bike a time or two and have measured, you know what an 1.5 inches of slack looks like. If that's what your bike calls for, then just wiggle it up and down and be done with it. Take a look at the wheels, the spokes, stuff like that. Look for some busted stuff. Give them a tap with your finger. They should all have a nice little ring. Going back to the chain a little bit, when you're checking your chain, make sure your sprockets aren't like sharp and knife edged over and stuff like that where they're about ready to give out or teeth missing. So let's get back on topic. I got a little off. Check the wheels and your spokes. Again, I'm not saying put a wrench on every single spoke, but just to look at it. So I prefer to check my wheels and my spokes when I'm cleaning the bike because it's just going around, scrubbing the tires, scrubbing the wheels, making sure everything's good, and I just kind of flick the spokes as they're going around just to make sure they all have a good look. Next thing is to be looking at your brake pads. It should be thicker than a dime. That's pretty easy measurement instead of actually getting a feeler gauge out and stuff. Dime's about where it is. When they start getting thinner than that, it's about time to replace them. All your fasteners, stuff like that. I have a Promoto billet rack on the back of my bike that for some reason likes to rattle loose. I use red Loctite on it and lock nuts, and they still rattle loose. So that's kind of one of my things. When I'm done riding the bike, I always go back and check those nuts. If they start to come loose again, I pull them off, red Loctite, put them back on. I'm usually good for a few rides, and then we're back to put more red Loctite on. So I don't always stress the case of putting red Loctite on things, but certain things like that I do. Other things always seem to get a little bit of blue, and that's about it. There are a few things in other videos I've talked about that I wouldn't put Loctite on, but for the most part, little fasteners here and there doesn't hurt for a drop. After I'm done checking all my fasteners and stuff like that, I'll look at the exhaust fasteners, make sure your exhaust system's not going to fall off halfway through your next ride. I like to look at all my fluid levels, my coolant tank. I'm lucky enough that my bike has a surge tank, so I keep my fluid right about the halfway mark. If I start to see it go down, I'll look for leaks, or I know that the fluid coolant's going somewhere inside the engine. It's not good. If it's way over full, then obviously, I pop something like a head gasket or something's going on there. Brake fluids, that's one thing that a lot of people don't look at. They just kind of look in there, they see a little bubble in that front little reservoir, and they assume it's good. Brake fluid absorbs water, and then when it does that, you start getting spongy brakes. It's not that big of a deal to flush it out. I shouldn't say that because there are bikes I've worked on that it is a big deal, but let's just take this back to dirt bikes that don't have ABS or all that fancy crap on them. Just flush it out. It's simple. There's videos out there. If you don't know what you're doing, obviously hire a professional to do it for you. Now, I want to finish in saying, while there's no one best way to look over your bike as far as where to start, what to stop, put a list together that works for you and try to repeat that list every time you're done using your motorcycle, and then it'll become repetitious. You'll be good. You'll get home, you'll check your bike. Some things will save you on that trail on that next ride. Sometimes you're out on multi-day rides and something comes apart. Well, you know, that just happens. There's nothing you can physically do about that. That's the nature of riding stuff that shakes and rattles and vibrates and has fun. What I'm really, you know, coming at you with is just to get your eyeballs on your bike, look at things. You know, if something doesn't look right, you know, start asking questions. Doesn't hurt to, you know, give the shops a call and ask them. Ask your friends. You know, everybody's got a good bike mechanic friend. For the love of God, if you go on the internet and read a forum, don't take the first answer you read as the holy truth. You know, I remember hearing somebody on the internet say, consult 10 different internet idiots, myself included, and if they all, you know, 9 out of the 10 idiots come up with the same answer, that's probably where you want to go. The 10th guy, he has no clue. So, anyway, with everything, you know, checking your bike out, hopefully that your next ride when you go out is trouble-free and you just experience nothing but fun. Because that's what it's all about. Just getting out there and exploring stuff, seeing things and having fun, and getting home safely. Alright guys, I've jib-jabbed long enough. Thanks again. Hopefully this voiceover wasn't too horrible. Let me know in the comments what you think. Voiceover, no voiceover. The topic that we talked about, checking your bike over. If you got something to add to it, definitely throw it in there. You know, I like to see what other guys come up with. Alright guys, I'm Robert with the Piston Slap channel. Thank you so much for tuning in today. We'll catch you on the next one.